My backyard creek was my sanctuary, until the HOA turned it into a battlefield. One minute, I'm sipping coffee on my porch, listening to the water ripple over smooth stones, and the next, I'm staring down a clipboard-wielding Karen who's convinced my little slice of paradise is a death trap. What they didn't see coming was how nature would fight back, flooding their perfect lawns with a vengeance I couldn't have dreamed up myself. Hey, if you're watching this, drop a comment below. Where are you tuning in from? Put a like if you want to constantly win any conflicts. I'm Mike Harper, a plumber from Willow Creek Estates, just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Been fixing leaky pipes for 17 years, but nothing prepared me for this mess. Stick around, because this story's wild, and I'd love to hear your take in the comments when we're done. What would you do if someone tried to rip away the one thing that keeps you sane? It all started on a crisp Saturday morning in April 2024. The sun was just peeking over the pines, casting golden streaks across my creek. It's not much, just a shallow stream, maybe 6 inches deep, winding through my yard. Blue jays chattered in the trees, and dragonflies zipped over the water. After a week of unclogging drains and wrestling with rusty valves, this was my reset button. I'd sit out there with a cold beer, watching the world slow down, feeling like nothing could touch me. That morning, I spotted Lily and Ethan Carter, the neighbor kids, poking around the creek's edge. "Mr. Mike," Lily yelled, waving a muddy stick. "Can we hunt for crawdads today?" Ethan, her little brother, grinned, already knee-deep in the water. "Go for it," I called back, chuckling. "Just don't take him home. Your mom will have my head." Their parents, Jen and Tom, didn't mind them playing here. Said it kept the kids off screens. My creek wasn't just mine, it was ours in a way. Then the mail came. I shuffled through bills and junk until I hit a thick envelope with Willow Creek HOA stamped in bold red letters. Weird, we'd never had an HOA in our little pocket of suburbia. Inside was a glossy pamphlet welcoming us to the newly expanded HOA, courtesy of the fancy Oak Ridge development up the hill. Pages of rules followed. No sheds over 10 feet, grass cut to 2.5 inches, blah, blah, blah. At the bottom, a line to sign, with a cheery note. Failure to respond in 30 days means you're in. I tossed it on the counter, figuring I'd deal with it later, or never. 3 days later, Karen Baxter showed up. Picture this: blonde bob, yoga pants, a smile so tight it could crack glass. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harper," she chirped, clutching a binder. "I'm Karen, Community Standards Chair for Willow Creek HOA. We need your signature." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Not interested. Her eyes narrowed, but that smile didn't budge. "It's not optional. Your deed's got a clause. 75% of homeowners voted yes, so you're in." She shoved a highlighted page at me, some legal mumbo-jumbo from 1998 I'd never seen. My stomach sank as I scribbled my name, already regretting it. She glanced past me, zeroing in on the creek. "That water feature's a concern," she said, like it was a kiddie pool I'd slapped together. "It's a natural creek," I shot back. "Been here longer than me." She clicked her pen. "Natural or not, it's a safety hazard. Kids could drown. We'll discuss it at the meeting Thursday." I watched her strut back to her gleaming SUV, dread creeping up my spine. Something told me this wasn't just about rules, this was personal. Thursday night, I dragged myself to the community center. Folding chairs squeaked as neighbors fidgeted, most looking as confused as I felt. Karen stood up front with her husband, Greg Baxter, HOA president, naturally. "Welcome to the Willow Creek family." Greg boomed, like we'd won a prize. "Our standards protect your property values." Some folks nodded. Others, like me, smelled a rat. Then Karen flicked on a projector, and there it was, a blurry photo of my creek. "This unapproved water feature on Pinewood Lane is a drowning risk," she declared. I shot up. "It's 4 inches deep. It's been here for decades." Jen Carter raised her hand. "My kids play there all the time. It's safe." Karen's lips pursed. "Do you have liability insurance for accidents on Mr. Harper's property?" Jen faltered, and the room went quiet. Greg chimed in. "Rules are rules. Fence it with a lock or fill it in, 30 days. I tried arguing. Wildlife needs it. It's not a feature, but they steamrolled me. "Fines start at $250, Karen added, smirking. I stormed out, my blood boiling. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Back home, I couldn't sleep. That creek wasn't just water. It was my peace, my escape. And now these HOA clowns thought they could erase it? I grabbed a flashlight and traced the stream uphill, past my property line, through a patch of woods. It led me to a retention pond behind Oak Ridge, right near the Baxter's McMansion. Something glinted in the dark, a drainage pipe, feeding straight into my creek. I snapped pics, my mind racing. This wasn't about safety. This was about their water, and my creek was in the way. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Sarah and Gwen. HOA emailed a $500 fine, says drain the creek or it's $100 a day. I stared at the pond in my photos, then at the fine. Whatever game the Baxters were playing, I wasn't folding yet. But I had a sinking feeling this was about to get a whole lot messier. They didn't just want my creek gone, they wanted to bury it alive, and I was powerless to stop them. Picture this, bulldozers tearing through my yard, ripping out the heart of my home, while Karen Baxter stood there grinning like she'd won the lottery. My blood was boiling, my fist clenched, but what really got me? The moment I realized this wasn't just about me, it was about every single one of us in Willow Creek Estates. After that first HOA meeting, I was a man on fire. I couldn't let this go, not after 17 years of that creek being my lifeline. Sunday morning, I'm out there with a shovel, tracing the water's path again, mud caking my boots. The kids, Lily and Ethan, tagged along, their little voices cutting through my fog. "Mr. Mike, why's the HOA so mean?" Ethan asked, kicking a pebble. I crouched down, forcing a smile. "Some people think rules matter more than nature, buddy. I'm gonna fix this for you guys." Their wide eyes lit a spark in me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Monday hit like a freight train. I'm sipping coffee, plotting my next move, when my phone pings. Another email from the HOA. Inspection scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Noncompliance fines now $750. $750? For a creek that's been here since before half these houses were built? I slammed my mug down so hard the handle cracked. Across town, Sarah and Gwen was dealing with her own headache. Karen had slapped her with a $300 fine for a non-approved flower bed. "Mike, they're picking us off one by one," she texted. I could feel the noose tightening. Tuesday, 8 a.m. sharp. They showed up. Karen strutted across my lawn like she owned it, trailed by two HOA cronies in polo shirts. "Morning, Mr. Harper," she sang, snapping photos of my creek. "This is an official violation." I stormed out, heart pounding. "You're trespassing, get off my property." She didn't flinch. HOA bylaws give us inspection rights. This water features a mosquito haven. Look at all this wildlife. She pointed at a frog like it was a crime scene. "That's a native ecosystem," I yelled, my voice echoing off the trees. "Mosquitoes breed in still water, not this." She scribbled something in her binder, smirking. "We'll see what the board thinks." They trampled my flower beds, zinnias I'd planted with my late mom's seeds, measuring the creek like it was some rogue pool. "You're ruining my garden," I barked. Karen glanced over, cool as ice. "Gardens can't be visible from the street. Section 9, Rule 4. Relocated." I was shaking, fury bubbling up. This wasn't about safety, it was control, plain and simple. As they left, she tossed a certified letter at me, "Drain the creek by May 1st, or fines jump to $150 daily." That was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to kill my sanctuary. I called Jen Carter that night, pacing my kitchen. "They're coming for us all, Jen. Your kids deserve that creek." She sighed. Lily cried when I told her it might go away. "What can we do?" I slammed my fist on the counter. "Fight. I'm digging into this. Something's off." Meanwhile, up in Oak Ridge, Karen was sipping wine on her porch, oblivious to the storm brewing below. She thought she'd won. She had no clue. Next day, I hit the county records office, fueled by coffee and spite. I'm flipping through dusty maps when Sarah bursts in, eyes wide. "Mike, you've got to see this." She'd found an old survey online. Our neighborhood sat on a reclaimed wetland, with my creek as its natural drain. "Look," she said, pointing. "It flows from their fancy hilltop, right under the Baxter's place." My jaw dropped. That pipe I'd seen? It wasn't random, it was their runoff, funneled through my yard. They weren't protecting kids, they were protecting their precious property values. Thursday, I'm back at the HOA meeting, armed to the teeth. The room's buzzing, neighbors whispering about fines, rules, Karen's reign of terror. I step up, projector ready. "This creek's part of a watershed," I say, slapping a map on the screen. "It stops flooding by draining groundwater from their homes." Karen cuts me off, voice sharp. "We've consulted experts, Mr. Harper." "Who?" I snap. I called every environmental firm in Mecklenburg County. Nobody's heard from you. The crowd murmurs. Greg jumps in. That's confidential. Next speaker. But I see it. Cracks in their armor. Friday morning, I wake to the roar of engines. Bulldozers roll in. HOA hired. Tearing up my creek bed. Karen's there, arms crossed, watching dirt pile over my oasis. I run out, screaming, "You can't do this." A worker shrugs. Orders, man. By noon, it's gone pipes buried where water once danced. I'm gutted, staring at mud where Lily and Ethan used to laugh. Across the street, Jen's filming it all, tears in her eyes. Up the hill, Greg's on his phone, probably gloating. But nature? She's not done yet. That night, a storm hits, rain slamming down like a reckoning. I'm on my porch, numb, when Sarah calls. Mike, drive up to Oak Ridge now. I grab my keys, heart racing. What I see stops me cold. Water's bubbling up through their streets, pooling in their yards. The Baxters' perfect lawn? A swamp. Nature didn't care about their rules. She'd found a new path, and it was headed straight for them. The flood wasn't just water, it was a wake-up call, and I was ringside for the chaos. Rain hammered down that night, turning Karen and Greg's pristine Oak Ridge into a muddy disaster zone, while my empty creek bed sat dry as a bone. I stood there, soaked to the skin, watching their world unravel, and I'll admit it, part of me felt a twisted thrill. They'd crushed my haven, but now nature was serving up a lesson they couldn't ignore. The storm hit hard around midnight, wind howling through Willow Creek Estates like it was mad at the world. I couldn't sleep. Every clap of thunder rattled my bones. Every flash of lightning lit up the ghost of my creek. I kept replaying that bulldozer tearing through my yard. Karen's smug grin burned into my brain. Down the street, Jen Carter was up too, texting me. Lily's asking if the frogs are okay. I don't know what to tell her. My chest tightened. Those kids didn't deserve this. Then Sarah's call came, her voice shaking. Mike, get up here. Oak Ridge is drowning. I threw on a raincoat, grabbed my flashlight, and peeled out in my truck. The streets were rivers, water sloshing over curbs. I hit Maple Lane, the Baxters' turf, and stopped dead. Storm drains gurgled, spewing water like geysers. Lawns were swamps, mailboxes half submerged. Greg was out there in his monogrammed jacket, yelling at a neighbor with a shovel, while Karen waved her arms, directing sandbags around their house only. Selfish to the end. I parked under an oak, watching the madness unfold. Sarah sloshed over, rain plastering her hair. 3 basements flooded already, sewers are backing up. She shouted over the downpour. I pointed my flashlight at the Baxters' place. Water bubbled up through their sod, cracking their driveway like an eggshell. They did this, I growled. Blocked my creek, and now it's coming for them. Sarah nodded, eyes fierce. We need proof, Mike. This is our shot. Back home, I dug into my maps, rain drumming on the roof. Across town, Tom Carter was hauling soaked rugs from his basement. His house wasn't hit bad, but close enough to scare him. I called him. Tom, your place okay? He sighed. Barely. Jen's freaking out, says the HOA is gonna blame the city. I snorted. Let him try. I've got something. That old wetland survey Sarah found? It showed my creek as the drain for a spring under Oak Ridge. Block it, and the water had nowhere to go but up. By dawn, sirens wailed up the hill. Emergency crews pumped water from flooded homes, neighbors in pajamas clutching coffee and staring at the mess. I walked up with Sarah, filming it all on my phone. A news van rolled in, and a reporter, Katie from Channel 9, spotted me. You're downstream, right? Any flooding at your place? She asked, mic in my face. Nope, I said, loud enough for Karen to hear. Had a creek that kept this under control. HO made me ditch it last week. Her eyes lit up. Right before this mess? Karen swooped in, shoving between us. Pure coincidence. City pipes failed. She dragged Katie off, but the seed was planted. I headed to Jen's place next. Lily and Ethan were on the porch, wrapped in blankets. Mr. Mike, our basement's wet, Lily said, voice small. Everything's ruined. I knelt down, gut twisting. I'm so sorry, kiddo. We're gonna fix this, promise. Jen stepped out, holding soggy photo albums. Insurance won't cover it, called it surface water. We're screwed. Her eyes were red, and I felt that spark from Sunday flare up again. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The community center was packed, air thick with anger. Karen banged her gavel, Greg beside her, both looking rattled. This is a city issue, Greg started, voice tight. We're pushing for fixes. A guy in the front row shot up. My basement's flooded twice this week. Who's paying? Karen snapped. Your insurance. They denied me, he yelled. The room erupted, voices overlapping. My walls are cracking. Sewage in my kitchen. I stood, heart pounding, and plugged my laptop into the projector. I've got facts, I said, clicking to a 1978 map. This was wetland. My creek drained it, until the HOA piped it underground. Water's gotta go somewhere. Karen's face went beet red. We followed procedure. What procedure? I fired back. You ignored warnings. Check the county records. Greg slammed his gavel. Enough. This is settled. But the crowd wasn't having it. Murmurs turned to shouts. As I packed up, Jen grabbed my arm. Our foundation's shifting, Mike. HOA says it's on us. I can't lose my home. Her voice broke, and I felt it. A fire I couldn't put out. We're not losing anything, I told her. Not to them. Up in Oak Ridge, Karen was on her phone, probably spinning lies to their lawyer. She thought she could bury this like they buried my creek. But water doesn't stay buried, and neither would the truth. The floodwaters didn't just soak their lawns. They cracked open the HOA's lies, and I was there with a crowbar to pry them wide. By morning, Karen and Greg's perfect little kingdom was a soggy mess, and I could feel the tide turning. My neighbors weren't just mad. They were ready to fight, and I was done playing nice. This wasn't about a creek anymore. It was about taking back our homes from tyrants in yoga pants and polo shirts. The rain tapered off at sunrise, leaving Willow Creek Estates in a tense hush. I walked my empty creek bed, mud sucking at my boots, picking up stranded minnows and tossing them into a bucket. Ethan Carter trailed behind, his sneakers squelching. Where'll they live now, Mr. Mike? He asked, holding a wriggling fish. I swallowed hard. We'll find him a home, kid. Promise. His big eyes hit me like a punch. Innocence caught in this mess wasn't fair. Up in Oak Ridge, chaos reigned. I drove up with Sarah and Gwen, dodging puddles and fallen branches. The Baxter Street was a war zone. Cracks spiderwebbed across driveways, water still pooling where it shouldn't. A guy named Dave Ruiz was out front, yelling at a tow truck hauling his flooded SUV. 3 feet in my garage, he shouted as I passed. Insurance says I'm on my own. Sarah nudged me. That's 5 houses now. Word spreading. Back home, I got a call from Tom Carter. Mike, county engineers are coming tomorrow. Jen heard it from a friend at City Hall. Flood's too big to ignore. My pulse kicked up. Good. We need hard proof. I spent the afternoon poring over records, coffee going cold. Sarah texted. Found an old impact study. Says blocking natural drains like your creek would flood uphill. HOA had it in 2019. I grinned, fierce. They'd known. They'd known and did it anyway. That evening, I'm at the Carters, helping haul soggy boxes to the curb. Jen's hands trembled as she pulled out a waterlogged quilt, her grandma's, hand-stitched. This was all I had left of her, she whispered. I clenched my jaw. They're not getting away with this, Jen. Across town, Karen was on her porch, barking at a landscaper about her ruined roses, like that was the crisis. Greg paced nearby, phone glued to his ear. They were scrambling, and I loved every second of it. Next morning, the engineers rolled in, county trucks, clipboards, the works. I met them at my property, pointing out the buried creek. This was the drain for that spring up there, I said, nodding toward Oak Ridge. The lead guy, a grizzled vet named Paul, squinted at the hill. We told developers 20 years ago, don't mess with wetlands. Guess they didn't listen. He scribbled notes, took soil samples. Sarah snapped pics, whispering, this could nail him. By noon, I'm back up in Oak Ridge, watching Paul's team test the Baxter Street. Water seeped from under foundations, hairline fractures snaking up brick walls. Dave Ruiz cornered me. My basement's toast, $20,000 in damage. HOA's dodging me. I clapped his shoulder. Hang tight, Dave. We're building a case. Meanwhile, Jen texted. Lily drew a picture of the creek. Says she misses it. That hit me hard. Kids shouldn't pay for adult stupidity. The county report dropped 2 days later, certified mail, to every doorstep. I ripped mine open, heart racing. Flooding directly linked to removal of natural drainage at 142 Pinewood Lane. HOA action disrupted watershed stability. My address, in black and white. Sarah called, ecstatic. It's official, they screwed up. Up the hill, Karen was flipping through her copy, face pale. Greg slammed their door shut. Too late, the truth was out. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors I'd never met. Lisa from Elm Street, Mark from Cedar Lane, spilling stories. They fined me $400 for a birdhouse. Made me repaint my mailbox twice. The HOA's petty reign was crumbling, and I was the match lighting the fire. Sarah swung by, eyes blazing. Emergency meeting at my place tomorrow, off the books. Spread it person to person, no texts. I nodded, adrenaline pumping. This ends now. As I locked up, tires screeched outside. I peeked through the blinds. Someone had slashed my truck's front tire, a note under the wiper. Mind your business. My blood ran hot. Across town, Karen sipped tea, thinking she'd scared me off. She didn't know me at all. That tire? It wasn't a warning, it was a battle cry. We were coming for her throne, and she'd never see it coming. They thought a slashed tire would shut me up, but it lit a fire I couldn't douse. And that night, it spread to every corner of Willow Creek Estates. Sarah's living room was a powder keg of fed-up neighbors, and I was holding the match. Karen and Greg had no idea their reign was about to drown in the same water they'd tried to control. I called Officer Daniels that morning about the tire, showed him the note, the jagged cuts and the rubber. Any guesses who? He asked, bagging the paper. HOA's top dogs aren't my biggest fans, I said, voice tight. He nodded, scribbling. We'll look into it. I didn't care about arrests. I wanted justice, and it was brewing faster than the cops could move. Up in Oak Ridge, Karen was probably bleaching her kitchen counters, oblivious to the storm heading her way. By dusk, I'm at Sarah's, squeezing into a packed room. The air buzzed with rage. Jen Carter clutching Lily's drawing of the creek. Dave Ruiz showing pics of his ruined garage. Lisa from Elm Street waving a $400 birdhouse fine. My kids' room's moldy now, Jen said, voice cracking. They're sleeping on my mom's couch. Dave slammed his phone down. $20,000 gone. And Karen says file a claim like it's nothing. I felt their hurt like it was mine, a knot tightening in my gut. Sarah stood on a chair, hands raised. We've got the county report. HOA caused this mess. But they won't fix it unless we make them. She tossed me a stack of papers, copies of that 2019 impact study she'd dug up. They knew blocking Mike's Creek would flood us, she said, voice sharp, and ignored it. The room erupted, they knew. My basement's trashed. I stepped up, pulse racing. This isn't just about my creek, it's about all of us. We end this together. Across town, Greg Baxter was on his deck, sipping a beer, probably thinking he'd weathered the storm. He didn't know we were plotting 2 streets over. Sarah laid out the plan. Saturday, we dig. Restore the old drains they covered up, call it community landscaping. HOA can't stop us if we're maintaining property values. Dave grinned. Section 12, right? I read the bylaws. I nodded, fierce. We start at the common lot. Work fast. Friday, I'm at the hardware store, loading shovels and pickaxes into my truck. New tire gleaming. Jen pulls up, kids in tow. Mike, Lily wants to help tomorrow, she says. Lily tugs my sleeve. For the frogs, Mr. Mike. I ruffle her hair, throat tight. For the frogs, kiddo. Meanwhile, Tom's texting. Heard Karen's calling an emergency HOA meeting Sunday. Mandatory. I smirked. Too late, Karen. Saturday dawns hot and sticky. 20 of us gather at the common lot. Me, Sarah, Dave, Jen, even old Mr. Powell with his bad hip, hauling lemonade. Kids run around, tossing rocks like it's a game. We dig into packed dirt behind the community center, sweat dripping, muscles screaming. Found it, Dave yells, unearthing a clogged stream bed, plastic junk from the developers still choking it. I swing my pickaxe harder, adrenaline pumping. They buried this on purpose. Around 3 p.m., a black SUV screeches up. Karen storms out, face twisted. This is vandalism. I'm calling the cops. I wipe mud off my brow, grinning. Hey, Karen, just maintaining drainage, per section 12.3. I hand her a laminated bylaws page, smudged but legible. She snatches it, sputtering. You're ruining everything. Greg rolls up behind her, eyes darting at the growing crowd, neighbors watching, filming. Let's go, he mutters, pulling her back. She glares at me, pure venom, but they peel out. We finish by dusk, 3 old channels cleared, water trickling through like it's waking up. Thunder rumbles, promising more rain. Sarah claps my shoulder. Think it'll hold. I watch the flow, heart pounding. We'll know soon. Back home, I collapse on my couch, mud still on my boots. Up the hill, Karen's on her phone, probably screaming at their lawyer. She thought she'd won with that tire stunt. She didn't see the army she'd built against her. That night, rain hits again, harder than before. I'm up at dawn, driving through Willow Creek. Streets that flooded last week? Dry. The water's moving, following our channels, right to the Baxters' backyard. I pull up and laugh. Their prize-winning lawn's a pond now, lapping at their patio. Nature didn't mess around, and neither did we. The water didn't just flood their yard. It washed away their power, and we were there to sweep up the pieces. By Sunday, Karen and Greg's backyard was a shimmering swamp, and the whole neighborhood saw it live on the 6 o'clock news. I stood in that packed community center, watching their empire crumble, and let me tell you, nothing's sweeter than justice served by a bunch of ticked-off neighbors with shovels and a dream. Saturday night, after we'd cleared those drains, I barely slept. Rain pounding my roof, my mind racing. I kept picturing Lily's frogs, Jen's ruined quilt, Dave's flooded garage. This had to work. Up in Oak Ridge, Karen was pacing her kitchen, staring at that new pond where her roses used to be. Greg was on the phone, voice low, probably begging their lawyer for a lifeline. They still thought they could spin this. Sunday morning, I'm out with Sarah, checking our handiwork. Water flowed smooth through the channels, no pooling, no chaos except at the Baxters. Their patio furniture bobbed in muddy water, a news crew filming it all. Katie from Channel 9 cornered Karen on her porch. Residents say your HOA ignored warnings about a creek. Any comment? Karen's face twisted. This is private property, turn that off. Katie smiled, cool as ice. We're on the easement, ma'am. Public record. I grinned from my truck, caught red-handed. The emergency HOA meeting hit at 7 p.m., mandatory or not, and the place was a zoo. Cars overflowed the lot. People crammed in, standing room only. Karen and Greg sat up front, flanked by their bored cronies, but their usual swagger was gone. Greg banged his gavel, voice shaky. We're here to address the landscaping issue. Dave Ruiz shot up. You mean the flooding you caused? FEMA's calling it a man-made disaster. Murmurs rippled FEMA. Are you kidding? Lisa from Elm Street stood next, holding her fine. My insurance dropped me, says we're a flood risk now. Who's paying for that? Karen snapped. That's not it is your fault. Jen Carter cut in, clutching Lily's drawing. My kids lost their home because of you. The room roared. Years of petty fines, stupid rules, all boiling over. I plugged in my laptop, hands steady. I've got proof, I said, projecting that 2019 study. They knew my creek stopped floods and buried it anyway. Sarah passed out copies, voice loud. Here's the county report too, says the same. They broke laws, ignored experts. Greg's gavel slammed. Those aren't public. They are now. I shot back, locking eyes with him. Freedom of information, pal. The crowd surged, you knew. My foundation's cracked. Karen grabbed the mic, desperate. We've kept this neighborhood pristine. Without us, it'd be a dump. Old Mr. Powell stood, slow and steady. Lived here 35 years. You filled in wetlands, built your big houses. Nature don't care about your rules. Dave climbed on a chair, waving papers. We've got a petition 3/4 signed. New elections, tonight. Karen's jaw dropped. That's absurd. It's bylaws, Sarah said, smirking. Section 7.2. The vote was a landslide, Sarah as president, Dave and Lisa on the board. Karen stormed out, Greg trailing, their faces ashen. Cheers erupted, hands clapping my back. Jen hugged me, tears in her eyes. We did it, Mike. Up the hill, news vans lingered, HOA negligence floods homes, blared the headline. I drove home, exhausted but buzzing. The Baxters for sale sign went up Monday, crooked in their swampy yard. New owners, a nice couple, moved in weeks later, thrilled about the natural pond. We'd won, but the real victory was still coming. The Baxters were gone, their swampy defeat a neighborhood legend, but the real win came when my creek roared back to life. Months later, I'm sitting by that water again, watching it sparkle in the sun, and I can't help but grin. Nature didn't just teach Karen and Greg a lesson. It showed us all what we're capable of when we stand together. This isn't just my story, it's ours, and I want you in on it. After that wild vote, Willow Creek Estates buzzed with new energy. Sarah, Dave, and Lisa took the HOA reins, first order of business, a water management plan. I'm at the common lot the next Saturday, knee-deep in mud with a dozen neighbors, digging out my old creek bed. Lily and Ethan Carter ran around, tossing pebbles, their laughter bouncing off the trees. "Mr. Mike, the frogs are coming back," Lily yelled, pointing at a tiny hopper. My chest swelled, worth every blister. Up in Oak Ridge, the new owners of the Baxter's place, Jake and Emily, joined in, hauling wheelbarrows. "Heard this used to be wetland," Jake said, wiping sweat. "We're keeping the pond, adding birdhouses." I nodded, grinning. Nature's a better neighbor than the last folks. Meanwhile, Sarah's on the phone with the county, locking in permits, legal this time. No more bulldozer surprises. By spring 2025, the creek flowed free, clear water rippling over stones, dragonflies skimming the surface. I'm out there one Sunday, coffee in hand, when Jen Carter walks up. Insurance settled, class action hit the HOA's policy hard. "We're rebuilding the basement." She smiled, soft. "Lily's already planning frog races." I laughed, picturing it. "Tell her I'm betting on the big one." Across the street, Dave Ruiz rolled by, waving. "Garage is fixed, $20,000 covered. We owe you, Mike." I shook my head. "We did this together." Up the hill, that danger, water hazard sign Karen left behind sat by the community garden, a new plaque underneath. "Nature, not a threat, a guide." Sarah put it there, poetic justice, she called it. I couldn't agree more. The lawsuits wrapped up by summer. Millions in damages paid out. The old HOA's insurance gutted. Lisa texted me pics of her new birdhouse, fine-free. Old Mr. Powell even stopped by, leaning on his cane. "Water's where it belongs now," he said, voice gravelly. "You kids did good." "Kids, huh?" I was 42, but I'd take it. One evening, I'm by the creek, dipping my fingers in the cool flow. A blue heron lands, graceful as anything, snagging a minnow. Sarah joins me, quiet. "Settlement's final next week. Everyone's covered." She paused, smirking. "Even got a call from Channel 9. Karen's pitching a victim story somewhere in Raleigh. Good luck with that." We laughed, the sound mingling with the water's gurgle. I look out at this little stream, my reset button, our victory, and think about what it took. Not just maps or shovels, but us, neighbors who'd had enough. The Baxters thought they could bully nature and us into submission. They didn't count on the fight in Willow Creek Estates, or the way water finds its path, no matter what. So here's my ask. What's your take? Ever had an HOA Karen try to run your life? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every one. And if this story hit you, subscribe. I've got more where this came from. What would you do if your peace got ripped away? Me. I'd fight like hell, and I bet you would too.